Simple girl accidentally bumps into billionaire's car, but he falls in love with her at first sight. Sophia Curry never imagined that a simple accident would change her life forever. One moment she was rushing through the crowded streets of New York, and the next, bam, she had collided with a sleek black sports car. Her heart pounded as the door swung open. Out stepped Massimo Smith, the billionaire known for his ruthless business tactics and icy demeanor. But instead of anger flashing in his piercing blue eyes, there was something else: intrigue. Why wasn't he furious? Have you ever met someone in the most unexpected way, only to realize they would change your life forever? Share your experiences in the comments. Welcome back to the channel, my beautiful story family. Before we begin, let me say something personal. We spend hours crafting these stories to bring you valuable lessons about love, humility, and fate. If you enjoy them, let us know where you're watching from. Now, let's dive into today's captivating love story. Sophia Curry dashed down the bustling city street, her caramel skin glistening with a light sheen of sweat as she wove through the lunchtime crowd. Her sneakers pounded the pavement, her overstuffed tote bag slapping against her hip with every step. At 24, she was a whirlwind of determination and frayed nerves, her dark curls bouncing as she checked her phone for the 5th time in 2 minutes. The interview was in 15 minutes, and the office was still 6 blocks away. She couldn't be late. Not today, not when this job could finally pull her out of the paycheck-to-paycheck grind. She darted around a corner, her focus locked on the crosswalk ahead, when the world tilted. Her shoulder slammed into something hard, metal, sleek, and unyielding. A sharp screech of tires filled the air, and she stumbled back, her tote spilling pens and a crumpled resume onto the asphalt. A car horn blared, and she looked up, heart hammering, to see a glossy black luxury sedan inches from her knees. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing a man in a tailored suit, his dark hair swept back, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. "Are you insane?" he snapped, his voice deep and edged with irritation, though his hazel eyes flickered with something else. Curiosity, maybe. "You nearly dented my car." Sophia scrambled to her feet, brushing gravel off her jeans as she squared her shoulders. "Me? You're the one parked like you own the street." Her tone was fire, fueled by adrenaline and the ticking clock in her head. She bent to scoop up her scattered belongings, her hands trembling but her glare steady. The man, Massimo Smith, though she didn't know it yet, raised an eyebrow, leaning out the window slightly. At 38, he was a billionaire who'd built his fortune in tech, a man used to people bending over backward to please him. But this woman, with her defiant stance and sharp tongue, didn't even flinch. He almost smiled. Almost. "It's a Maserati," he said, as if that explained everything. "And I wasn't parked. You ran into me." "Then maybe drive slower in a pedestrian zone," she shot back, shoving her resume into her bag. She glanced at her phone, 12 minutes left, and muttered under her breath, "Great. Just great." Massimo tilted his head, studying her. She was a mess, curls wild, jacket askew, a smudge of dirt on her cheek. But there was something magnetic about her, a raw energy that tugged at him. "You're late for something," he said, not a question. "Yeah, no thanks to you." She straightened, brushing past the car, but her eyes flicked to his, and she faltered for a split second. "Sorry, okay? I didn't mean to. Whatever. I've got to go." "Wait," he called, his voice softer now, laced with an impulse he didn't fully understand. "What's your name?" Sophia stopped, turning halfway. "Why? So you can sue me for scratching your precious Maserati?" His lips twitched, a real smile breaking through this time. "Maybe I just want to know who's bold enough to yell at me in the middle of downtown." She hesitated, her guard still up. Sophia Curry." "Massimo Smith," he replied, and her brow furrowed slightly. She'd heard that name before, hadn't she? Somewhere in the blur of news headlines she never had time to read. He leaned forward, resting an elbow on the window frame. "Let me make it up to you. Where are you headed?" "I don't need your help," she said quickly, stepping back. "I'm fine. I'll walk." "You're not fine, you're late." He nodded toward the passenger side, where his driver, a stoic man in a black cap, had already opened the door. "Get in. We'll take you." Sophia's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at the car, then at her phone, 9 minutes now, and cursed under her breath. "This isn't some charity case thing, is it? Because I don't do pity." Massimo chuckled, a low, warm sound that caught her off guard. "Trust me, pity's the last thing on my mind. Get in, Sophia Curry. Unless you want to explain to your boss why you missed the interview." Her eyes narrowed, weighing him. There was something about his gaze, intense, unguarded, that made her pulse skip. Not fear, but something else she couldn't name. Against her better judgment, she slung her bag over her shoulder and slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her skin. The driver shut the door, and Massimo turned to face her from the front. "Where to?" he asked. "Elm Street, the Carter Building," she said, folding her arms. "And don't think this means I owe you anything." "Wouldn't dream of it," he replied, his tone teasing, but his eyes locked on hers a beat too long. The car pulled into traffic, smooth and silent, and Sophia stared out the window, trying to ignore the heat creeping up her neck. Who was this guy, and why did he keep looking at her like that? "So," Massimo said after a moment, breaking the quiet, "what's the interview for?" She shot him a sidelong glance. "Why do you care?" "Because you're interesting." He shrugged, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Most people would have groveled after bumping into me. You didn't." "Maybe I just don't grovel," she said, her chin lifting. "It's a receptionist job, nothing fancy. But it pays, and I need it." He nodded, his expression shifting, less playful, more thoughtful. "Fair enough. You'll get it." "You don't even know me," she scoffed. "I know you've got fire," he said simply. "That's enough." She didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. The car glided through the city, the skyline blurring past, and she stole a glance at him. Massimo Smith. The name nagged at her, a puzzle piece she couldn't place. He caught her looking and smiled again, softer this time, and her stomach flipped despite herself. They reached the Carter Building with 3 minutes to spare. The driver opened her door and she stepped out, smoothing her jacket. Massimo leaned out the window, watching her. "Good luck, Sophia," he said. "Knock 'em dead." "Yeah, thanks," she muttered, turning toward the entrance. But she paused, looking back. "Why'd you do this? Really?" He didn't answer right away, just held her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Maybe I like a good story," he said finally. "And you feel like the start of one." She frowned, unsure what to make of that, then shook her head and hurried inside. The glass doors swung shut behind her, but Massimo didn't move, his eyes lingering on the spot where she'd disappeared. His driver slid back into the front seat, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Sir," the driver prompted. "Follow her," Massimo said quietly, leaning back. Discreetly. "I want to know more." The driver nodded, pulling away from the curb, and Massimo's fingers drummed against the armrest, his mind already racing. Sophia Curry wasn't just some girl who'd bumped into his car. She was a spark, a collision he hadn't seen coming. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir, something he couldn't quite name. Back inside, Sophia sat in the waiting room, her resume clutched in her hands, her thoughts a jumble. She'd made it on time, thanks to him, but that look in his eyes, that cryptic parting shot, it stuck with her, a thread she couldn't pull loose. Who was Massimo Smith? And why did she feel like this wasn't the last she'd see of him? The receptionist called her name and she stood, shoving the questions aside. 1 hour down, and her life had already shifted in ways she couldn't yet grasp. Little did she know, Massimo was already weaving himself into it, a twist she'd never see coming. "Hi, I'm Sophia Curry," she said, breathless. "Here for the 1:30 interview." The receptionist, a stern woman with a tight bun, glanced at the clock, 1:32, and pursed her lips. "You're late." Sophia started, then stopped, swallowing her protest. "Sorry. Traffic." The woman sighed, handing her a clipboard. "Fill this out. They're waiting." Her tone suggested Sophia had already lost points, and Sophia's stomach sank as she scribbled her details, her pen shaking slightly. She'd made it, barely, but the clock wasn't on her side. Minutes later, she was ushered into a sleek conference room where two people sat across a long table, a man with a clipboard and a woman in a crisp blazer, her expression pinched. The woman didn't bother with a greeting. "Miss Curry," she said, her voice clipped, "we value punctuality here. You've kept us waiting." Sophia slid into the chair, her cheeks burning. "I know, I'm so sorry. There was an incident on the way. It won't happen again." The man scribbled something on his clipboard, not looking up. "Let's hope not. This is a fast-paced environment. We need someone reliable." "I am reliable," Sophia said, leaning forward, her tone firm despite the nerves clawing at her. "I've juggled 2 jobs and night classes for years. I don't quit, and I don't slack." The woman, Ms. Hargrove, her name tag read, raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Pretty words. Let's see if your references back them up. Why do you want this position?" Sophia took a breath, steadying herself. "Because I'm good with people, I'm organized, and I need a job that doesn't leave me scraping by every month. I can handle this. Give me a chance and I'll prove it." Miss Hargrove's lips thinned and she jotted a note. "We'll see. Tell us about a time you—" The door swung open, cutting her off mid-sentence, and the air in the room shifted. Sophia turned, her breath catching as Massimo Smith stepped inside, his suit impeccable, his presence commanding. The man with the clipboard dropped his pen. Miss Hargrove's face went pale, then flushed red as she shot to her feet. "Mr. Smith," she stammered, smoothing her blazer, "we didn't expect you. I mean, it's an honor to—" "Relax, Hargrove," Massimo said, his voice smooth but firm, his eyes sweeping the room. They landed on Sophia, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. "I was in the building. Thought I'd check in." Sophia blinked, her mind racing. "Mr. Smith? Here." The pieces clicked too slowly. She hadn't connected the dots, hadn't realized the Carter building was part of Smith Enterprises, the sprawling tech empire Massimo owned. She'd bumped into the billionaire who ran this place, and now he was standing 5 feet away, watching her interview crash and burn. Ms. Hargrove recovered, her tone shifting from icy to syrupy in an instant. "Of course, sir, we're just finishing up with Miss Curry here. She's eager, if a bit tardy." Massimo's gaze didn't leave Sophia. "Tardy, huh? Funny, she seemed pretty quick on her feet when I met her." Sophia's jaw tightened, confusion swirling. Met her? He was outing their encounter right here. Ms. Hargrove's eyes darted between them, her composure cracking. "You've met?" she asked, forcing a smile. "Briefly," Massimo said, stepping closer to the table. "She made quite an impression." He paused, his tone light but pointed. "I trust you're giving her a fair shot?" "Oh, absolutely," Ms. Hargrove said, too fast, her hands fluttering to adjust her notes. "Miss Curry was just telling us how capable she is. Weren't you, Sophia?" Sophia stared, caught off guard by the sudden pivot. 10 seconds ago, Hargrove had been ready to toss her out. Now she was beaming like Sophia was her star pupil. The man with the clipboard nodded vigorously, as if he'd never doubted her. "Yeah, Sophia said slowly, her eyes flicking to Massimo. I was. Good, Massimo said, his smile widening just enough to unsettle her. I'll leave you to it, then. He turned to go, but not before adding, Hargrove, let me know how this one turns out. I'm curious. Yes, sir, Hargrove chirped, practically bowing as he exited. The door clicked shut and the room exhaled, but Sophia's pulse didn't slow. What the hell was that? Hargrove sat back down, her demeanor transformed. Well, Sophia, she said, her voice warm now. Let's continue. Tell us more about your experience. Sophia nodded, answering on autopilot, but her mind was elsewhere. Massimo Smith owned this company. He just walked in, flipped the script, and left without explanation. Why? Was it really about her bumping into his car, or was there more? His parting words echoed, I'm curious, and a shiver ran through her. Curious about what? The interview stretched on, Hargrove peppering her with questions, her tone almost fawning now. Sophia played along, but her thoughts kept circling back to Massimo. That look in his eyes, the way he'd stepped in, it wasn't random. She could feel it. And as the clock ticked past the hour mark, she couldn't shake the sense that this job, this moment, was only the beginning of something bigger, something tied to him. When they finally wrapped up, Hargrove stood, extending a hand. We'll be in touch, Sophia. You've got potential. Thanks, Sophia said, shaking her hand, but her smile was tight. She grabbed her bag and left the room, her steps quickening as she headed for the elevator. Potential? Sure. But what did Massimo see in her that Hargrove didn't? And why did it feel like he was pulling strings she couldn't see? Outside, the city hummed around her, but she barely noticed. Massimo's driver idled across the street, the black Maserati gleaming in the afternoon sun. He was still here, watching, waiting. And Sophia, for all her fire, didn't know whether to run toward him or away. Not yet. But one thing was clear. This collision wasn't over. It had only just begun. Sophia stepped out of the Carter building, the late afternoon sun casting a golden glow over the bustling street. Her mind buzzed from the interview, Ms. Hargrove's sudden shift from disdain to deference, Massimo's unexpected entrance, and that cryptic parting line, I'm curious. She adjusted her tote bag, her fingers brushing the crumpled resume inside, and let out a slow breath. She'd survived, maybe even impressed them, but the weight of it all lingered like a storm cloud she couldn't shake. Across the street, the black Maserati still sat, its tinted windows reflecting the city's chaos. Massimo's driver leaned against the hood, his cap pulled low, but he straightened when he saw her. Sophia's stomach flipped. He was still here. Why? She hesitated, then started walking the opposite way, her pace quick, determined to put distance between her and whatever game Massimo was playing. But the sound of a car door opening stopped her cold. Miss Curry, a voice called. Not the driver's, but Massimo's, smooth and unmistakable. She turned, reluctantly, to see him stepping out of the back seat, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his expression unreadable but intent. He crossed the street in long strides, closing the gap before she could decide whether to bolt. What now? She asked, folding her arms, her tone sharp to mask the unease creeping up her spine. You here to critique my interview skills? Massimo stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, a faint smile tugging at his lips. You did fine in there. Better than fine, considering Hargrove's a tough sell. Then why are you still hanging around? She glanced at the car, then back at him. Don't you have, I don't know, a company to run? I do, he said, his hazel eyes locking onto hers. And I'm here because of it. I've got an offer for you. Sophia blinked, caught off guard. An offer? I just interviewed for a receptionist gig. What's this about? Not the receptionist job. He stepped closer, his voice lowering, though the street noise hummed around them. I want you to work for me, directly, as my assistant. Her mouth opened, then closed, a laugh escaping before she could stop it. You're joking, right? I bump into your car, yell at you, and now you want me to be your assistant? Why? Because you're not afraid of me, he said simply, his gaze steady. Most people see my name and start bowing. You didn't. You've got grit, Sophia, and I need someone like that. She stared at him, her mind racing. Massimo Smith, billionaire tech mogul, offering her a job out of nowhere. It didn't add up. I don't even know you, she said, shaking her head. And I'm not qualified. I've never been an assistant to anyone, let alone someone like you. You'll learn, he replied, unfazed. I'll teach you. The pay's triple what the receptionist gig offers. Full benefits. You'd start Monday. Triple. The word hit her like a punch, echoing the financial strain she'd been drowning in. Rent due, her brother's tuition, the endless cycle of barely making it. She thought of her apartment, the leaky faucet she couldn't afford to fix, the late-night shifts she'd been pulling at the diner. But still, she hesitated, her instincts screaming caution. What's the catch? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Guys like you don't just hand out jobs like this. What do you really want? Massimo's smile faded, replaced by something sharper, more serious. No catch. I see potential in you, Sophia. That's it. But if you're looking for a reason to say no, I won't stop you. She studied him, searching for the lie, but his expression gave nothing away. Just that same intensity, that pull she'd felt since the moment she'd crashed into his car. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, another overdue bill notification, no doubt, and she clenched her jaw. She couldn't afford to walk away from this, not when it could change everything, but accepting felt like stepping into a maze with no map. I need to think about it, she said finally, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. This is a lot. Take the weekend, he said, pulling a sleek business card from his pocket and handing it to her. His fingers brushed hers, brief but electric, and she pulled back fast. Call me by Sunday night. My personal line's on there. She took the card, the embossed Massimo Smith, glinting under the sunlight, and nodded. Fine, but don't expect me to say yes just because you're throwing money at me. I wouldn't dream of it, he said, that teasing edge creeping back into his tone. He turned to go, then paused, glancing over his shoulder. You're more than you think you are, Sophia. Don't forget that. He slid back into the Maserati, the driver shutting the door behind him, and the car pulled away, leaving her standing there, card in hand, heart pounding. She watched until it disappeared around the corner, then looked down at the number scrawled in his sharp handwriting. More than she thought she was? What did that even mean? The next 2 days blurred by in a haze of doubt and deliberation. Saturday night found her pacing her tiny apartment, the TV droning in the background as her younger brother Jamal sprawled on the couch, textbooks scattered around him. At 17, he was all lanky limbs and big dreams, college next year if they could scrape the funds together. You're gonna wear a hole in the floor, he said, not looking up from his notes. What's with you? Sophia stopped, running a hand through her curls. Got a job offer, big one, but it's weird. Weird how? He sat up, eyeing her. Like creepy weird or rich people weird? Rich people weird, she said, dropping onto the couch beside him. This guy, Massimo Smith, he's some billionaire. Wants me to be his assistant. Out of nowhere. Jamal's eyes widened. Massimo Smith? Like the Massimo Smith? Tech guy? Forbes list? Yeah, that one. She handed him the card and he whistled low. Damn, Soph, that's insane. You taking it? I don't know. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. It's good money, like, good. Could pay off your tuition, fix this place up. But he's intense. I don't trust it, Jamal grinned. Maybe he's just into you. Billionaire falls for the sassy sister. Movie stuff. Shut up, she said, shoving him playfully, but her laugh faded fast. Was that it? No, it couldn't be. Massimo didn't strike her as the lovesick type. There was something else, something he wasn't saying. By Sunday evening, she sat at the kitchen table, the card in front of her, her phone in hand. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and her resolve wavered. She thought of Jamal's textbooks, the eviction notice pinned to the fridge, the exhaustion she carried like a second skin. Then she thought of Massimo, his confidence, his push, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. She dialed the number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Sophia," he said, his voice warm like he'd been expecting her. "Decided to take a chance?" "Yeah," she said, her throat tight. "I'm in. But this better not be some power trip, Massimo. I'm not here to play games." "No games," he promised, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "See you Monday, 8 a.m. sharp." "My office." She hung up, her hands shaking slightly, and leaned back in the chair. 2 hours of wrestling with the decision, and now it was done. She'd said yes to the job, to him, to whatever this was. But as she stared at the card, a flicker of doubt lingered. Massimo Smith wasn't just offering her a lifeline. He was pulling her into his world, and she had no idea what waited there, or why he'd chosen her to step into it. Sophia hung up the phone, the silence of her cramped apartment settling around her like a heavy blanket. Massimo's voice still echoed in her ears, calm, assured, with that undercurrent of something she couldn't pin down. She'd said yes, locked herself into this wild leap, and now Monday loomed just hours away. Her fingers traced the edge of his business card, the sharp corners grounding her as she replayed the call. No games, he'd said. She'd hold him to that. The next morning, she stepped into the gleaming lobby of Smith Enterprises at 7:55 a.m., her stomach a knot of nerves and resolve. Dressed in her best blazer, second-hand but crisp, and a pair of slacks she'd ironed twice, she felt out of place among the sleek suits and clicking heels. The receptionist, a different one from her interview, handed her a badge and directed her to the top floor. Massimo's office. The elevator ride was a blur, her reflection in the mirrored walls, showing a woman who looked more confident than she felt. When the doors slid open, Massimo was waiting, leaning against a glass wall with a coffee in hand, his suit a deep navy that made his hazel eyes stand out. "Right on time," he said, pushing off the wall with a grin. "Welcome to the chaos." "Chaos?" she asked, stepping out, her tone dry. "Thought you ran a tight ship." "I do," he said, leading her down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. "But it's still a circus most days. You'll see." The first week flew by in a haze of schedules, emails, and Massimo's rapid-fire instructions. He was demanding but fair, his expectations high yet laced with a patience that surprised her. She adapted fast, learning his rhythms, coffee black at 9 a.m., meetings stacked until noon, a quiet hour in the afternoon where he'd stare out at the city skyline, lost in thought. But what threw her off was how often he found reasons to be near her. It started small. He'd linger by her desk, asking for updates she'd already emailed, his voice casual but his presence magnetic. "How's the Henderson report coming?" he'd say, even though she'd sent it an hour ago. She'd catch him watching her over his laptop, his gaze lingering a beat too long before he'd look away. By Friday, he was calling her into his office for no reason at all, just to toss ideas around, projects she wasn't even assigned to. "You don't need me for this," she said once, standing by his desk as he sketched something on a notepad. "You've got a whole team." "Maybe I like your take," he replied, not looking up, though a smile played at his lips. "You're sharper than you give yourself credit for." She rolled her eyes but stayed, her guard softening despite herself. He was charming, too charming, and it was starting to mess with her head. The shift came on a late Thursday, 2 weeks into the job. The office had emptied out, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, as Sophia typed up notes from a meeting Massimo had blown through like a hurricane. She was alone, or so she thought, until she heard his footsteps behind her. "Still here?" he asked, his voice low, closer than it should have been. She turned, and there he was, leaning against her desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The air felt charged, heavier than it had any right to. "Finishing your mess," she said, nodding at the screen. "You talk faster than I can type." He chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "You keep up better than most." He straightened, stepping around the desk until he was beside her chair, his shadow falling over her. "What's this?" She glanced at the screen, a typo she'd missed, and reached to fix it, but he beat her to it, his hand brushing hers as he tapped the keyboard. Her breath hitched and she pulled back, but he didn't move away. Instead, he stayed, his eyes locking onto hers, searching. "You're good at this, Sophia," he said, quieter now, almost tender. "Better than good." "Thanks," she managed, her throat dry. He was too close, close enough she could smell his cologne, a mix of cedar and something sharp. Her pulse raced, and she hated it, hated how her body reacted when her mind screamed to keep him at arm's length. He reached out then, his fingers grazing her cheek as he tucked a stray curl behind her ear. The touch was light, deliberate, and it stopped her cold. Time stretched, the hum of the office fading until it was just them, his hand lingering near her face, his gaze soft but intense. "You should wear your hair like this more often," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It suits you." Sophia swallowed, her voice failing her for a split second before she found it. "What are you doing, Massimo?" He blinked as if snapping out of a trance and dropped his hand, stepping back. "Sorry," he said, though he didn't sound sorry. Not really. "Got carried away." She stood, needing space, her chair scraping against the floor. "Yeah, well, don't." Her tone was firm, but her hands trembled as she grabbed her bag. "I'm here to work, not whatever this is." He nodded, his expression shifting. "Regret, maybe, or something deeper." "You're right. Won't happen again." But as she headed for the elevator, she felt his eyes on her, a pull she couldn't ignore. The doors closed, and she leaned against the wall, her heart hammering. What the hell was that? He'd crossed a line, and she'd let him. Worse, a part of her had wanted him to. She cursed under her breath, the memory of his touch burning into her skin. Massimo stayed behind, staring at the empty desk, his jaw tight. He'd meant to keep it professional, to keep her at a distance, but she was under his skin now, her fire, her defiance, the way she looked at him like she could see through his polished exterior. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. This wasn't part of the plan. He'd hired her for her spark, not to lose himself in it. The next day he was back to business, crisp and distant, but the tension simmered beneath every exchange. He'd call her in for a task, then linger a moment too long. She'd catch him staring, and he'd look away, but the air crackled anyway. By the end of the week she was dodging him as much as he was seeking her out, a dance neither of them acknowledged. One evening, as she packed up, he appeared again, this time with a file in hand. "Need your thoughts on this," he said, holding it out. She took it, their fingers brushing, and she froze, meeting his gaze. "Massimo," she said, her voice low, warning. "Stop." He didn't flinch, just held her stare. "Stop what?" "You know what." She stepped back, clutching the file. "I'm not some puzzle for you to figure out." "Maybe I'm the one who's puzzled," he said, softer now, and the honesty in it threw her. He turned away before she could respond, leaving her standing there, the file heavy in her hands. 2 hours had passed since that first late-night moment, and the space between them was a minefield. attraction, doubt, and something unspoken twisting tighter with every glance. Sophia didn't know what he wanted or what she did, but one thing was clear. Massimo Smith wasn't just her boss anymore. He was a question she couldn't stop asking, and the answer was closer than she was ready to admit. Sophia clutched the file Massimo had handed her, the weight of his words. Maybe I'm the one who's puzzled, still hanging in the air as he walked away. She stood frozen by her desk, the office quiet except for the faint hum of the city beyond the windows. Her chest tightened, a mix of frustration and something dangerously close to longing. She shoved the file into her bag, grabbed her coat, and left, determined to shake off the moment. But his voice, his touch, the way he'd looked at her, they clung to her like a second skin, following her into the restless night. The next week was a blur of tense silences and stolen glances. Massimo kept his distance, his demeanor cool and professional, but the undercurrent between them pulsed stronger than ever. She caught herself watching him too, his hands as he signed contracts, the way his jaw tensed during calls. By Friday she was exhausted, ready to escape into the weekend when he dropped the bombshell. "Clear your Saturday night," he said, leaning against her desk with that casual confidence she'd come to dread. "I need you at the gala." Sophia looked up from her laptop, frowning. "Gala? What gala?" "The annual Smith Enterprises fundraiser," he said like it was obvious. "Black tie, big donors, the works. I need my assistant there." "I'm not your date," she shot back, crossing her arms. "Get someone else to hold your champagne." He smirked, unfazed. "Not a date. A necessity. You've got a knack for reading people. I need that in the room. Plus, you're on the payroll. Consider it over time." She opened her mouth to argue, but the look in his eyes, sharp, expectant, stopped her. He wasn't asking. And the extra pay, whispered in the back of her mind, could cover Jamal's textbooks for the semester. She sighed, relenting. "Fine, but I don't have anything to wear to some fancy gala." "Taken care of," he said, sliding an envelope across her desk. "Pick something out. My treat." She stared at the envelope, then at him, suspicion flaring. "This better not be a trick, Massimo." "It's not," he said, his tone softening. "Trust me, just this once." Saturday evening rolled around, and Sophia stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress, a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and flowed to the floor, had come from a boutique she'd never have stepped into on her own. Massimo's assistant had delivered it that morning, along with heels and a note. "See you at 7. M." She'd grumbled, but the transformation was undeniable. Her curls were swept up, a few framing her face, and the dress shimmered under the light, turning her into someone who belonged at a gala, not scrubbing tables at a diner. When Massimo's driver pulled up outside her building, she stepped out, nerves buzzing. Massimo waited by the car, his black tuxedo sharp and tailored, his expression unreadable, until he saw her. His eyes widened just for a moment before he recovered, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You clean up well, Curry," he said, opening the door for her. "Don't get used to it," she replied, sliding into the back seat, though her pulse quickened at the way he looked at her, like she'd stolen the air from the room. The gala was a whirlwind of crystal chandeliers, clinking glasses, and people who dripped wealth. Sophia stayed close to Massimo, her senses on high alert as he worked the crowd, charming donors, deflecting questions, all with a practiced ease. She played her part, whispering names and details she'd memorized from his files, earning approving nods from him that made her chest warm despite herself. But the night shifted when a woman cut through the crowd, tall, blonde, dripping in diamonds, her red lips curled in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Veronica Tate, Massimo's ex-fiancée, a name Sophia had only heard in passing from office gossip. She stopped in front of them, her gaze raking over Sophia like she was sizing up prey. "Massimo," Veronica purred, leaning in to kiss his cheek, her hand lingering on his arm. "You've been hiding from me." "Hardly," he said, his tone cool, though he didn't pull away. "Good to see you, Veronica." Her eyes slid to Sophia, sharp and calculating. "And who's this? Your latest project?" She laughed, a brittle sound loud enough to draw stares. "Darling, where'd you find her? She looks like she's playing dress-up in someone else's closet." Sophia's face burned, her hands clenching at her sides, but she forced a smile. "Sophia Curry," she said, her voice steady. "I work for Massimo, and this dress fits just fine, thanks." Veronica's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing. "Oh, I'm sure it does. But let's be honest, sweetheart. You're out of your depth here. Stick to fetching coffee, The words stung, but before Sophia could fire back, Massimo stepped forward, his hand brushing her arm, a quiet signal to hold off. He turned to Veronica, his expression hardening. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but carrying across the room. Heads turned, the chatter dipping. "Sophia's my assistant, and she's damn good at it. Better than most people here, including you. So if you've got a problem, take it somewhere else." Veronica froze, her composure cracking as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sophia's breath caught, stunned by the steel in his tone, the way he'd put himself between her and the jab without hesitation. Veronica recovered fast, tossing her hair with a forced laugh. "Touchy, aren't we?" she said, though her eyes flashed with something raw, hurt maybe, or fury. "Enjoy your little pet, Massimo. She won't last." She turned on her heel and swept away, leaving a wake of whispers. Massimo exhaled, turning to Sophia, his hand still hovering near her arm. "You okay?" "Yeah," she said, though her voice shook slightly. "Didn't need you to fight my battles, though." "Didn't do it for you," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Did it for me. She doesn't get to talk to my people like that." "My people." The words hit her harder than they should have, warmth spreading through her chest. She looked up at him, the gala lights catching in his eyes, and for a moment the room faded. Just the two of them, the tension from weeks past surging back, sharper now. "Thanks," she said, softer than she meant to, and his gaze held hers, something unspoken passing between them. "Don't mention it," he replied, his voice low, and he stepped back, breaking the moment. But as they moved through the rest of the night, his hand brushed hers once, twice, accidental, maybe, or not, and Sophia knew they'd crossed another line. Veronica's barb had backfired, binding them tighter, and the question of what they were to each other loomed larger than ever. 2 hours after stepping into the gala, Sophia was no longer just the assistant in over her head. She was the woman Massimo had defended, publicly, fiercely, and the fallout of that choice was only beginning to unfold. Sophia lingered near Massimo as the gala wound down, the echo of his defense still ringing in her ears. Veronica's exit had left a ripple of tension in the room, but Massimo played it off with his usual charm, steering them through the last rounds of handshakes and small talk. His hand brushed hers again as they said goodbyes, a fleeting touch that sent her pulse racing despite her efforts to ignore it. When they finally stepped outside, the night air was cool, the city lights glinting off the pavement, and Sophia felt the weight of the evening settle into her bones. She'd held her own, thanks to him, but the look in his eyes, steady, protective, kept pulling her back to that unspoken edge they'd been dancing on. The next week pushed them deeper into that gray space. Massimo's excuses to be near her grew bolder, late meetings he didn't need her for, coffee runs he insisted on joining. She caught herself softening, laughing at his dry humor, lingering when she should have left. By Thursday, the office was a pressure cooker of unspoken words, and when a client call ran long, she found herself alone at her desk past 9 p.m., rain lashing the windows in sheets. She packed up, cursing as she realized she'd forgotten an umbrella. The lobby was empty when she stepped out, the downpour soaking her within seconds. She hugged her bag to her chest, resigned to a drenched walk to the bus stop when headlights cut through the storm. Massimo's Maserati rolled up, the window sliding down to reveal him, hair damp, tie undone. "Get in," he called over the rain, his voice firm. "You're not walking in this." Sophia hesitated, water dripping from her curls, then relented, sliding into the passenger seat. "You didn't have to do this," she said, brushing wet strands from her face. "I'd have managed." "You're soaked," he said, pulling back onto the road. "And I'm not letting you catch pneumonia on my watch." She shot him a look, half annoyed, half amused. "Always the hero, huh?" "Only when it suits me," he replied, a grin tugging at his lips. The car hummed through the rain-slicked streets, the wipers a steady rhythm against the quiet between them. She watched the city blur past, the heat of the car seeping into her chilled skin, and wondered how they'd ended up here, him driving her home, her letting him. Then the engine sputtered. A jolt, a groan, and the Maserati coasted to a stop on a deserted side street, the rain hammering the roof. Massimo cursed under his breath, tapping the dashboard like it might coax the car back to life. "Of all the nights," he muttered, pulling out his phone. "No signal." "Perfect." Sophia laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Your fancy car can't handle a little rain." "It's not the rain," he said, shooting her a mock glare. "It's karma for showing off." He glanced out the window, then at her. "There's a diner half a block up. We can wait it out there." She nodded, and they bolted through the storm, her heels slipping on the wet pavement, his arm steadying her as they reached the diner's awning. Inside it was warm and empty, the lone waitress waving them to a booth with cracked vinyl seats. They slid in, dripping and breathless, and Sophia couldn't help but laugh again, the absurdity of it hitting her. "Some night," she said, wringing out her hair. "Your gala, your car, everything's falling apart around you." Massimo leaned back, watching her with that quiet intensity she'd come to recognize. "Not everything," he said, his voice low. The waitress dropped off 2 coffees, and he wrapped his hands around his mug, his gaze never leaving her. "You're still here?" Her laughter faded, the air shifting. "Yeah, well, I don't have much choice, do I? Stuck with you in a storm." "You've got more choice than you think," he said, leaning forward now, elbows on the table. "You could have said no, to the job, the gala, this. But you didn't." She met his eyes, her throat tightening. "Maybe I'm just stubborn." "Maybe," he agreed, but his tone softened, grew serious. "Or maybe you feel it too." "Feel what?" she asked, though she knew deep down what was coming. Her coffee sat untouched, steam curling between them. He took a breath, his fingers tightening around the mug. "This, United States. I've been trying to ignore it, Sophia, but I can't. Not anymore." He paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm falling for you. Have been since the day you yelled at me over my car." Her heart stopped, then thudded hard against her ribs. She stared at him, the rain drumming outside, the diner's fluorescent hum fading to nothing. "Massimo, don't," she said, shaking her head. "You're my boss. This isn't—" "I know what I am," he cut in, his eyes fierce, "and I know what this looks like. But it's not some fling, not some power play. It's you. Your fire, your laugh, the way you don't back down. I've never met anyone like you, and it's driving me crazy trying to pretend I don't want this." She swallowed, her mind racing, emotions tangling, shock, fear, and a flicker of something she'd buried deep. "You don't even know me," she said, her voice shaky. "Not really." "I know enough," he replied, reaching across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "And I want to know more, if you'll let me." The space between them crackled, 2 hours of build-up crashing into this moment. She looked at his hand, then his face, raw, unguarded, no trace of the polished billionaire, and felt her resolve waver. The rain pounded on, trapping them in this confession, and Sophia didn't know if she wanted to run or lean in. But one thing was certain. Massimo had just laid his cards on the table, and the next move was hers. Sophia sat frozen in the diner booth. Massimo's words, "I'm falling for you," hanging heavy in the damp air. The rain battered the windows, a relentless drumbeat that matched the chaos in her chest. His hand hovered near hers, close enough to feel the warmth. But he didn't push, just watched her with those hazel eyes, steady and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. She wanted to argue, to shove the confession back into the box it had burst from, but her voice caught, tangled in the truth she'd been dodging. She felt it too, had felt it for weeks, and it terrified her. I need time, she managed finally, pulling her hand back, her fingers curling into her lap. This is too much, Massimo. He nodded, slow and deliberate, though a flicker of disappointment crossed his face. Take all the time you need, he said, his voice soft but firm. I'm not going anywhere. The waitress shuffled by, refilling their coffees, and the moment stretched thin, fragile, until the tow truck's headlights flashed through the window, breaking the spell. They left in silence, the ride back to her place, a quiet reckoning of what had shifted between them. The next few days were a tightrope walk, Massimo giving her space but not retreating, Sophia wrestling with her feelings in the quiet moments between tasks. By midweek, the tension was a living thing, coiled and ready to snap, when he called her into his office with a new urgency. Act 7. The Hidden Past Revealed. Sophia stepped into Massimo's office, the familiar skyline stretching beyond the glass walls, but the air felt different, thicker, charged with something she couldn't name. He stood by his desk, a file in hand, his jaw tight in a way that set her nerves on edge. No teasing smile, no lingering glance, just a man who looked like he'd been carrying a weight too long. "Close the door," he said, his voice clipped. She did, her pulse ticking up as she crossed the room. "What's going on?" she asked, stopping a few feet from him. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He didn't answer right away, just handed her the file. "Open it." She took it, flipping the cover to reveal a stack of documents, letters, photos, a faded newspaper clipping. Her brow furrowed as she scanned the top page, a handwritten note dated 20 years back. The words blurred. "Massimo, I can't stay," until a photo slipped free, landing on the desk. A young woman, caramel-skinned, with curls like hers, smiled up at her, arm around a teenage Massimo. Sophia's breath hitched. "Who is this?" she asked, though her voice trembled with the answer she already half knew. "My sister," he said, stepping closer, his eyes locked on the photo. "Lila. She left when I was 16, no explanation, just gone. I've been looking for her ever since." Sophia's fingers tightened on the file, her mind racing. The resemblance was uncanny, same eyes, same tilt to the smile. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because I think you're connected to her," he said, his voice raw. "That day we met when you crashed into my car, it wasn't just chance. I saw her in you, Sophia. The way you move, the way you fight. And then this came up." He tapped the clipping. A small-town obit from 5 years ago. Lila Curry, 32, survived by daughter Sophia. Her knees buckled and she gripped the desk, the world tilting. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not... My mom's name was Grace. Grace Curry. She never said anything about..." "She changed it," Massimo cut in, his tone urgent. "After she left, I hired people to track her years ago. She cut ties, started over. I didn't know about you until this week when the investigator found the link." Sophia's vision swam, the photo blurring as tears pricked her eyes. You're saying, you're my uncle. The word felt foreign, impossible, but the pieces slammed together. Her mother's silence about her past, the way Massimo had latched onto her from the start. No, he said quickly, stepping closer, his hands hovering like he wanted to steady her. Not uncle, cousin. Lila was my half-sister, same dad, different moms. She was older, took off before I could figure out why. I didn't know she had a kid. I didn't know about you. Her breath came shallow, ragged. So all this, the job, the gala, the car breaking down, was that just you? What? Digging into me? Using me to find her? No, he said, fierce now, closing the gap until he was inches away. I hired you because I saw something in you, something real. The rest came later when I couldn't shake the feeling. And then I fell for you, Sophia, before I knew any of this. That's the mess I'm in. She stared at him, the confession from the rainy night crashing back, layered now with this bombshell. You fell for me, she echoed, her voice breaking. And now you're telling me we're family? Cousins, he said, his jaw clenching. Distant enough that it's not. It's not wrong. But I get it. It's a lot. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't have proof until now. She turned away, pressing a hand to her forehead, the file trembling in her grip. 2 hours ago, she'd been teetering on the edge of admitting her own feelings, and now this. Her mother's secret life. Massimo's hidden past. Their tangled bloodline. I don't know what to do with this, she said, her voice small. I don't even know who I am anymore. You're still you, he said, stepping behind her, his voice low, steady. This doesn't change that. It just explains things. Why I couldn't let you go. She spun to face him, anger flaring through the shock. You should have told me the second you suspected. Not waited to drop it like this. I know, he admitted, his eyes searching hers. I was scared. Scared you'd run. Scared I'd lose you before I even had a chance. I'm sorry, Sophia. The apology hung there, raw and real, and she felt the fight drain out of her, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. She sank into a chair, the file slipping to the floor, papers scattering. Massimo knelt beside her, not touching, just waiting, his own breath uneven. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, the weight of 2 hours and 2 decades etched into his face. We figure it out, together, if you'll still have me around. She didn't answer, not yet, the storm of emotions too thick to navigate. But as he stayed there, silent and steadfast, she knew one thing. This revelation had shattered everything she thought she understood, about her mother, about Massimo, about herself. And whatever came next, they were bound by more than attraction now, by a past neither of them had seen coming. Sophia sat in the chair, the scattered papers from Massimo's file, a chaotic map of her upended life. His confession, cousins distant enough that it's not wrong, echoed in her skull, warring with the ache of her mother's hidden past. He knelt beside her, his presence steady but heavy, his apology still hanging in the air. She couldn't look at him, not yet, her mind a tangle of betrayal, confusion, and the stubborn pull she'd felt toward him since day one. We figure it out, he'd said, and she wanted to believe him, but the ground beneath her had shifted too far to trust anything solid. The next day, she called in sick, needing space to breathe, to process. Massimo didn't push, just sent a text. Take what you need. I'm here. She spent hours staring at old photos of her mom, Grace, Lila, searching for clues she'd missed, tears staining the edges. By evening, she'd resolved to face him, to demand more answers, when her phone buzzed with a news alert that stopped her cold. The headline screamed across her screen, Billionaire Massimo Smith's Mystery Woman, Family Ties or Gold-Digging Scheme. A grainy photo of them at the gala, his hand on her arm, her looking up at him, splashed beside it, captioned with venom. Sophia Curry, assistant with a convenient past, cozies up to her rich cousin. Her stomach dropped, bile rising as she scrolled. The article was a hatchet job, leaked details from an anonymous source, twisting their connection into a sordid tale of ambition and deceit. From diner shifts to designer gowns, how far will she climb? Her phone buzzed again. Jamal, her brother. "Soph, what the hell is this? People are blowing up my messages." His voice was panicked, and she could hear the TV blaring in the background, a news anchor dissecting her life like it was a soap opera. "I don't know," she said, her voice shaking. It's complicated. I'll explain later." She hung up, hands trembling as she pulled up Massimo's number, but before she could call, a knock rattled her apartment door. It was him, rain-soaked and urgent, his coat dripping onto the floor as he stepped inside without asking. "You saw it," he said, not a question, his eyes scanning her face. "I'm handling it. My team's tracking the leak. Probably Veronica, stirring the pot." "Handling it?" Sophia snapped, stepping back, her voice rising. "It's out there, Massimo. They're calling me a gold digger, saying I'm using you. My own cousin, for God's sake. How do you handle that?" He flinched, but his jaw tightened. "It's lies, and we'll prove it. I've got lawyers, PR, whatever it takes. But you need to trust me." "Trust you?" She laughed, sharp and bitter, pacing the small room. "This is my life now, some tabloid punching bag. I didn't sign up for this. I'm not—" Her voice cracked and she stopped, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm not worth this mess. You're better off without me dragging you down." Massimo's eyes darkened and he closed the distance, his hands hovering near her shoulders. "Don't say that," he said, low and fierce. "You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm the one who pulled you into this. My world, my past. And I'm not letting you walk away because some vulture with a keyboard thinks they know you." She shook her head, tears welling despite her fight to hold them back. "You don't get it. I've never belonged in your world. I'm the girl who bumps into cars, not the one who gets gala defenses or family secrets. This—" She gestured at her cramped apartment, the peeling paint, then at him. "This doesn't fit. I don't fit." "You fit with me," he said, his voice breaking through her spiral, steady and sure. He stepped closer, his hands finally settling on her arms, grounding her. "I don't care what they say, Sophia. I've spent years building walls, keeping people out, and you crash through every one of them without even trying. You think I'd let you go now?" She looked up at him, his face blurred through her tears, and saw the raw determination there. No billionaire polish, just a man who meant every word. "They'll keep coming," she whispered. "The media, Veronica, whoever else. It won't stop." "Then we face it," he said, his grip tightening slightly. "Together. I'm not ashamed of you or us, or what we could be. Are you?" The question hit her like a punch, stripping away the noise. Was she? She thought of the diner, the rainy night, the gala, every moment he'd stood by her, fought for her, even before he knew the truth. And now, with the world clawing at them, he still wouldn't let go. Her breath steadied, the storm in her chest easing just enough to see him clearly. "No," she said finally, her voice small but firm. "I'm not." His shoulders relaxed, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "Good," he said, pulling her into a hug, his chin resting on her head. "Because I'm not losing you. Not to them, not to anyone." She let herself sink into him, the rain still pounding outside, the media firestorm raging beyond her door. 2 hours had passed since the alert, and her world had cracked open again, publicly this time. But Massimo's arms around her were a tether, a promise. The leak had exposed their secret, but it had also laid bare his resolve, and hers was hardening to match it. Whatever came next, Headlines, accusations, or worse, they'd face it side by side, a bond forged in chaos and stronger for it. Sophia leaned into Massimo's embrace, the warmth of his arms cutting through the chill of the media storm raging outside her apartment. His heartbeat steadied her, a quiet anchor against the headlines branding her a gold digger, a schemer, a footnote in his billionaire life. "We face it together," he'd said, and for the first time in hours, she believed it might be possible. The rain slowed to a drizzle, and he pulled back, brushing a tear from her cheek with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice low, resolute. "I'll make it right." She nodded, clinging to that promise as he left to meet his PR team, vowing to bury the leak. But the quiet didn't last. By morning, her phone buzzed with texts from Jamal, friends, even strangers, all reacting to the spiraling narrative. She turned it off, focusing on work, on Massimo's steady presence when she returned to the office. For a fragile moment, it felt like they might outlast the chaos. 2 weeks later, the storm seemed to settle. Massimo's lawyers had slapped gag orders on key outlets, and the headlines shifted to fresher scandals. Sophia threw herself into her role, her desk a fortress of schedules and reports. Massimo's trust in her a lifeline she hadn't expected to need so badly. He was softer now, coffee brought to her desk, late-night talks about nothing and everything. But the weight of their exposed connection lingered, a shadow neither could fully shake. Then, on a quiet Wednesday, an envelope slid under her apartment door. No return address, just her name scrawled in sharp ink. She tore it open, her gut twisting as photos spilled out. Massimo at a bar, laughing with a man she didn't recognize, timestamps from months ago before they'd met. A typed note was tucked inside. He bet he could charm the next girl who crossed his path. "You were just a game, Sophia. Ask him about Victor Kane." Her hands shook, the words searing into her. Victor Kane, Massimo's old business rival, a name she'd heard in passing, always with a bitter edge. She flipped through the photos again, her breath shallow. Another sheet listed dates, bets, sums, $50,000 that he'd win her over in 6 months. The evidence was meticulous, damning, and it clawed at every moment she'd trusted him. She stormed into his office that afternoon, the envelope clutched tight, her voice trembling with fury. "What is this, Massimo?" He looked up from his desk, confusion flickering across his face as she slapped the contents in front of him. His eyes scanned the photos, the note, and his expression darkened, jaw clenching. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" she snapped, stepping back. "Is it true? Did you bet on me with Kane? Was I just some trophy to win?" "No," he said, standing fast, his voice sharp. "This is bullshit, Sophia. I don't even talk to Kane anymore. This is fabricated." "Fabricated?" She laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "It's got dates, photos, details. You expect me to believe it's all fake when it looks this real?" "It is fake," he insisted, rounding the desk, reaching for her. "Listen to me. Veronica's behind this. She's been gunning for me since the gala, and Kane's her perfect weapon. They're trying to tear us apart." She jerked away, her eyes blazing. "You keep blaming her, but this—" She jabbed a finger at the papers. "This feels like you, the charming Massimo Smith, playing me from the start. Was any of it real, or was I just a fun little challenge?" "Everything was real," he said, his voice cracking raw. "You think I'd risk this, us, for some petty bet? I love you, Sophia. I've never said that to anyone, and I'm saying it now. Please don't let them do this." Her heart stuttered at the words, "I love you," but the doubt was a knife, twisting deeper with every photo she'd seen. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered, tears spilling over. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep wondering if I'm a fool." "Sophia, don't—" he started, but she was already backing toward the door, her resolve hardening through the pain. I quit, she said, the words slicing through the air. I'm done. She turned, dropping her badge on the floor, and walked out, his desperate call of her name echoing behind her. By nightfall, she was gone. Her apartment sat empty, a single note left on the table. Jamal, I'll call soon. Need space. Her phone was off, her belongings packed into a duffel she'd slung over her shoulder as she boarded a late bus out of the city. The rain had returned, streaking the windows as she stared into the dark, the betrayal of fresh wound she couldn't outrun. Massimo stood in his office, the scattered photos mocking him from the desk. He swept them off with a furious hand, his breath ragged. Veronica and Kane, they'd played their hand perfectly, and he'd lost her. But he wasn't done. Not yet. He grabbed his phone, dialing his investigator. Find her, he said, voice steel, and dig up everything on Kane and Veronica. I want proof. 2 hours had unraveled everything. Sophia's trust, their fragile bond, his chance to make it right. She'd vanished into the night, leaving him with a cliffhanger he couldn't accept. Her resignation, her disappearance, and a fight he'd waged to bring her back, no matter the cost. Sophia's bus rumbled through the night, the rain-smeared windows reflecting her hollow stare as she clutched her duffel bag. Massimo's voice, I love you, Sophia, looped in her mind, clashing with the betrayal etched into those photos, the note, the cold precision of the setup. She'd walked away, resigned, disappeared, but the ache in her chest grew heavier with every mile. She didn't know where she was going, just away, far from the city, from him, from the lie she feared she'd fallen for. By dawn, she'd stepped off in a small town, a speck on the map where no one would look for her, her resolve to vanish as firm as her breaking heart. Massimo, meanwhile, stood in his office, the wreckage of their fight scattered across the floor. Her badge glinted where she'd dropped it, a silent accusation. He'd lost her, let Veronica and Kane rip her away with their twisted game, and the fury burned hot. But the fear was colder, sharper. He'd meant every word, and she hadn't believed him. His investigator was already on it, chasing leads on Kane's dealings, Veronica's spite. But Massimo couldn't wait. He grabbed his keys, his coat, and started his own search, determined to find her before the damage was permanent. Act 10. The fight for love. Weeks bled into a month, and Massimo was a man possessed. He tracked every thread, bus schedules, credit card trails, calls to Jamal that went unanswered. His life a blur of sleepless nights and dead ends. His investigator uncovered the truth. Kane had forged the betting scheme, Veronica supplying the photos from old files, a calculated strike to fracture them. Proof in hand, a paper trail of payments, doctored timestamps. Massimo clutched it like a lifeline, but it meant nothing without her. Then a break, a grainy security photo from a small-town diner, Sophia's curls unmistakable as she paid cash for a coffee. He drove through the night, the Maserati roaring down empty roads, until he reached Willow Creek, a quiet hamlet nestled in rolling hills. His heart pounded as he stepped into the diner, the bell jingling, and there she was, behind the counter, apron tied over a simple dress, her face thinner, eyes shadowed. She froze when she saw him, the coffee pot trembling in her hand. Massimo, she said, her voice a mix of shock and steel. What are you doing here? I found you, he said, stepping forward, his voice rough with weeks of strain. I couldn't stop looking. She set the pot down, her jaw tightening. I told you I was done. You shouldn't be here. You're wrong, he said, pulling the proof from his coat. Documents, emails, the unraveling of Veronica and Kane's lie. It was fake, Sophia. All of it. They set me up to hurt you, and I've got everything to prove it. Her eyes flicked to the papers, then back to him, guarded. So what? It doesn't change what I felt. Humiliated, used. I can't go back to that. You don't have to, he said, his voice softening, desperate. "But I need you to hear me. I love you. I've loved you since that damn car crash, and I've been fighting to get you back every second since you left." She shook her head, stepping back, but her hand drifted to her stomach, a small, unconscious move that stopped him cold. His breath caught, eyes narrowing. "Sophia, are you—" Her face paled and she dropped her hand, but it was too late. "Don't," she whispered, but the truth was there, unspoken, in the faint curve beneath her apron. Pregnant. His child. The realization hit him like a freight train, and he closed the gap, his hands hovering near her arms. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Because I didn't know if I could trust you," she said, tears brimming. "I found out after I left, and I couldn't face you, not with everything." "You don't have to face it alone," he said, fierce now. "I'm here, Sophia. For you. For this." He gestured to her stomach, then stepped back, turning to the handful of diner patrons who'd gone quiet, watching. "Listen up," he called, his voice carrying, raw. "This woman, she's everything. I love her more than I've ever loved anyone, and I've been an idiot letting her think otherwise. I'm not leaving without her knowing that." The room stilled, Forks pausing mid-air, eyes wide. Sophia stared at him, tears spilling over, her resolve cracking. "Massimo, stop." "No," he said, turning back to her, dropping to one knee, not a proposal but a plea. "I'll fight for you every day, Sophia. You, our kid, whatever comes. I don't care about the company, the money. None of it means anything without you. Please, come back to me." Her breath hitched, the diner fading as she looked down at him, disheveled, determined, the man who'd chased her across state lines with proof and a promise. The weight of the last 2 hours, the last month, pressed down, and she felt the walls she'd built tremble. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice small. "Of you, of this, of everything." "I'm scared too," he said, standing, his hand finding hers, tentative. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." She searched his face, the love there undeniable, and something shifted. Fear giving way to a fragile hope. She didn't say yes, not yet, but she didn't pull away either, her fingers curling into his. The diner erupted in scattered applause, a small-town chorus to their raw reunion, and Massimo pulled her close, his forehead against hers. 2 hours had brought him here, through betrayal, distance, and a secret she'd carried alone, and now they stood on the edge of something new, uncertain but together. Sophia didn't know if love could conquer all, but as his arms tightened around her, she felt the fight in him mirrored in her own heart, a cliffhanger resolved not with an end, but a beginning. Sophia stood in Massimo's arms in the quiet diner, the hum of small-town applause fading as his forehead rested against hers. The weight of his confession, "I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you," settled into her, mingling with the shock of his discovery and the fragile hope blooming beneath her fear. She hadn't said yes, not fully, but her hand stayed in his, her breath sinking with his as the reality of their child and their tangled bond anchored them in that moment. He'd fought for her, crossed miles and lies to find her, and though trust was still a jagged edge, she felt the pull of something stronger than doubt. They left Willow Creek together that night, the proof of Veronica and Kane's scheme tucked away, a silent vow to face whatever came next side by side. The weeks that followed were a slow rebuild. Massimo brought her back to the city, not to his penthouse, but to her apartment, giving her space to breathe while staying close. Dinner drop-offs, quiet talks, doctor visits where his hand shook as much as hers at the first ultrasound. Jamal forgave her disappearance with a hug and a grin, already plotting uncle duties. The media storm quieted. Veronica and Kane's plot exposed in a press release that left them scrambling. But Sophia cared less about vindication than the man who'd never stopped chasing her. Love grew, tentative but real, rooting deeper with every shared glance. 4 months later, the air was crisp with late fall, the city streets alive with golden leaves and the hum of evening traffic. Sophia, now visibly pregnant, walked beside Massimo, her hand tucked into his elbow as they headed toward a cafe she'd picked for dinner. Her curls bounced free, her laughter light at some dry quip he'd made about boardroom antics, and he watched her with a quiet awe that hadn't faded since Willow Creek. She'd softened toward him, trust rebuilt in the small, steady ways he showed up, every day, no exceptions. "Hold up," he said suddenly, stopping her mid-step. She turned, brow furrowing, and realized where they were, the exact corner where she'd crashed into his Maserati all those months ago. The memory hit her, sharp and vivid, her spilled bag, his sharp words, the spark neither had seen coming. "What's this about?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. "You gonna yell at me again for denting your car?" He chuckled, but his eyes were serious, a nervous edge she hadn't seen before. "No yelling," he said, stepping back, his hand slipping into his pocket. "Just something I need to do." Her breath caught as he dropped to one knee, right there on the sidewalk, pulling out a small velvet box. The street noise faded, passers-by slowing to watch, but all she saw was him. Massimo, tie slightly askew, hazel eyes locked on hers, holding a ring that glinted under the streetlights. "Sophia Curry," he started, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You crashed into my life, literally, and I've been falling ever since. You're my fire, my fight, the one who makes every damn day worth it. I've chased you across towns, through lies, and I'd do it all again. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you and our kid." Her hand flew to her mouth, tears welling fast as the weight of it hit her. The spot where it began, now where he was asking for forever. She'd run from him once, doubted him, lost him. But here he was, kneeling in the chaos of their first collision, offering her everything. Her heart thudded, loud and sure, and she nodded before the words could catch up. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking into a laugh. "Yes, Massimo." He surged to his feet, sliding the ring, a simple band with a single emerald, her color, onto her finger, and pulled her into a kiss that drowned out the cheers erupting around them. Her arms wrapped around his neck, his hands framing her face, and the world shrank to just them, two people who'd stumbled into each other and fought their way to this. "Still think I'm trouble," she murmured against his lips, her smile teasing. "The best kind," he replied, grinning, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Always will be." 2 hours had passed since they'd left her apartment for dinner, and now they stood where it all started, a full circle sealed with a promise. The city buzzed around them, but Sophia felt only the warmth of his arms, the weight of the ring, and the life they'd build, messy, real, and theirs. From a chance crash to a lifetime yes, they'd turned chaos into love, and she knew, standing there, that every step had been worth it. Sophia pulled back from Massimo's kiss, the emerald ring glinting on her finger, as the small crowd on the sidewalk clapped and whistled. His grin was wide, unguarded, and she felt the same lightness bubbling in her chest, a joy that drowned out the months of doubt and distance. They'd stood in that exact spot where she'd crashed into his life, and now it was theirs, marked by a proposal she'd never seen coming but couldn't imagine refusing. He took her hand, leading her toward the cafe, promising dinner and a future, and she let herself believe in it fully, the weight of their shared past lifting with every step. The next few months were a whirlwind of planning, Massimo insistent on giving her whatever she wanted, Sophia adamant about keeping it real, not some billionaire spectacle. They settled on a balance, a day that felt like them, and as her belly grew rounder, their bond deepened, rooted in quiet nights and fierce promises. Jamal teased her mercilessly about becoming Mrs. Billionaire, but his pride shone through, and Massimo became family in ways neither had expected. Act 12. The Wedding and Reconciliation. The ceremony unfolded on a crisp spring day, the venue a sprawling garden just outside the city, alive with blooming flowers and soft sunlight filtering through ancient oaks. Sophia stood at the altar, her white gown flowing over her now subtle post-baby bump. Their daughter, Leela Grace, born 2 months prior, cooing in Jamal's arms nearby. The dress was simple but elegant, lace trailing down her arms, and Massimo couldn't take his eyes off her. He wore a tailored suit, no tie, his hair slightly tousled, and when he took her hands, his voice broke as he said, "I do." "I do," she echoed, her smile trembling with the weight of it. 2 hours of vows, tears, and a love that had weathered storms to reach this moment. The guests, family, friends, a few trusted colleagues, erupted in applause, and little Leela's giggle cut through, drawing laughs as Massimo scooped her up mid-ceremony, kissing her tiny forehead before handing her back to Jamal. The reception flowed under a canopy of lights, music weaving through the air as they danced, Sophia's head against his chest, his arms steady around her. "We made it," he murmured, and she nodded. The past, Veronica, Kane, the media, feeling like a distant echo against the solidity of now. But the echo wasn't gone. As the toasts began, a commotion stirred near the garden entrance. Veronica stormed in, her red dress a slash of defiance, heels clicking furiously on the stone path. "You think you can just erase me?" she shouted, her voice slurring slightly, eyes wild as she pointed at Massimo and Sophia. "She's nothing, nothing, and you're a fool for picking her." Gasps rippled through the crowd, Sophia stiffening in Massimo's arms, but he didn't flinch. Security, 2 burly men in black, moved fast, grabbing Veronica's arms as she flailed, her words dissolving into a tirade. "You'll regret this, both of you." "Get her out," Massimo said, his voice calm but steel-edged, his hand tightening on Sophia's. The guards dragged Veronica back, her protests fading into the night, and the guests fell silent, tension thick, until Jamal stood, glass raised. "To the bride and groom," he called, his grin breaking the spell. "May your love kick ass louder than the Crashers." Laughter erupted, glasses clinked, and the moment passed, Veronica's outburst a blip against their day. Later, as the music slowed, Massimo pulled Sophia aside, away from the crowd, to a quiet corner of the garden. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a curl from her face, his eyes searching hers. "Yeah," she said, leaning into his touch. "She doesn't get to ruin this. Not us." He nodded, pulling her close, his lips grazing her forehead. "Never. You're my family now. You, Lila, Jamal. That's what matters." She smiled, resting her head against him, the lights twinkling above as the night stretched on. 2 hours of a ceremony had sealed their vows, and Veronica's chaos had only sharpened the clarity. They'd fought for this, through betrayal, secrets, and storms, and won. The wedding wasn't just a celebration, it was a reconciliation of every jagged piece, a promise forged in fire, and as they swayed together, Sophia knew they'd hold it tight, no matter who tried to tear it apart. Sophia swayed with Massimo in the quiet corner of the garden, the reception's lights casting a soft glow over them, as the echoes of Veronica's outburst faded into the night. His arms were a steady haven, his whispered promise, "You're my family now," settling deep in her chest. The wedding had been their victory, a hard-won moment of peace after years of chaos, and as they rejoined the guests, Lila's sleepy giggle in Jamal's arms sealed it. They'd built something unbreakable. The night ended with laughter, cake-smeared kisses, and a drive home under a starlit sky, their new life stretching out like a promise kept. The weeks that followed were a gentle rhythm, Massimo scaling back at Smith Enterprises to be home more, Sophia juggling motherhood and a part-time role coordinating charity projects he'd started in her name. Lila grew, all chubby cheeks and curious eyes, and their apartment buzzed with a warmth neither had known before. But peace, they'd learned, was never permanent. Act 13. The near tragedy. It started with whispers. Victor Kane, Massimo's old rival, hadn't faded quietly after his scheme with Veronica unraveled. Word reached Massimo's team of backroom deals, shady investments, a man nursing a grudge that had festered into something dangerous. Massimo brushed it off, focused on his family, but Sophia felt the unease, a prickle at the back of her neck she couldn't shake. One rainy afternoon, 6 months after the wedding, she was driving home from a charity meeting, Lila strapped into her car seat, cooing at a toy. The city streets were slick, traffic slow, and Sophia hummed along to the radio, glancing at her daughter in the rearview mirror. She didn't see the truck until it was too late. A hulking delivery rig barreling through a red light, its brakes suspiciously silent. It slammed into her car's side, metal crunching, glass shattering, and the world spun into darkness. Massimo got the call at his office, his phone slipping from his hand as the words, "Car accident, critical condition," sank in. He raced to the hospital, the Maserati tearing through traffic, his mind a blur of panic and prayer. Lila was safe, scraped but miraculously unharmed, whisked to Jamal's care. But Sophia, his Sophia, was in surgery, her life hanging by a thread. He paced the sterile waiting room, hands clenched, eyes red-rimmed, until a doctor emerged, face grim. "She's stable," the man said, but it was close. "Internal bleeding, broken ribs. She's lucky to be alive." Massimo demanded to see her, and they let him in, her still form hooked to machines, bruises blooming across her caramel skin. He sank into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Don't you dare leave me." Hours bled into days, Massimo a fixture at her side, unshaven, tie discarded, living on coffee and guilt. The police investigation confirmed it. The truck's brakes had been tampered with, the driver a hired pawn with ties to Kane, a staged accident, revenge for Massimo's refusal to bend, for the empire he'd built and the love he'd claimed. Kane was arrested, his smug denials crumbling under evidence, but Massimo didn't care about justice, only her. On the 4th day, Sophia stirred, her eyes fluttering open to find him there, his head bowed over her hand. "Massimo?" she rasped, voice weak but alive. He jolted upright, tears spilling as he gripped her tighter. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "What happened?" she murmured, pain etching her face. "An accident," he said, throat tight. "Kane, he tried to take you from me. But you're okay. Lila's okay. I've got you." Her fingers squeezed his, faint but real, and she managed a small, tired smile. "Told you. I'm trouble." "The best kind," he choked out, kissing her knuckles, his relief a tidal wave. "I love you, Sophia. I've never stopped proving it, and I won't." She nodded, eyes drifting shut again, but her grip held, a lifeline between them. 2 hours had stretched into days in that hospital room, Massimo's vigil a testament louder than words. Through rival sabotage, near tragedy, and the edge of loss, he'd stayed, his love carved into every moment by her side. Kane's plot had failed, but it had sharpened what they'd always known. Their bond was forged in fire, and no one could break it. Sophia's hand stayed clasped in Massimo's as she drifted back to sleep in the hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors a lifeline after the chaos of the staged accident. He didn't let go, not even when the nurses urged him to rest, his vigil a silent oath, his love etched into the way he traced her fingers, willing her strength to return. Days turned to weeks, and she healed, ribs mending, bruises fading, while Kane's arrest became a distant victory, overshadowed by her recovery. Massimo brought Lila to visit, her toddler giggles filling the room, and slowly their family pieced itself back together, stronger for the near loss. By the time Sophia was discharged, leaning on Massimo as they walked to the car, the shadow of tragedy had lifted, replaced by a quiet, fierce gratitude. They settled back into life, cautious but unbroken. Massimo doubling security, Sophia insisting on normalcy for Lila's sake. The city hummed around them, and though the scars lingered, physical for her, emotional for him, they leaned into each other, a unit forged through fire. Then a new spark. Sophia realized she was pregnant again, a surprise discovered amid routine checkups, and Massimo's grin when she told him lit up their apartment like dawn. Act 14. The Miracle. 9 months later, the air was thick with summer heat, the hospital room a stark contrast to the one where Sophia had fought for her life. Now it was alive with anticipation, Massimo pacing as she gripped his hand through labor, her breaths sharp but steady. "You've got this," he murmured, brushing sweat-damp curls from her forehead, his voice a tether as she pushed. Lila was with Jamal, safe and oblivious, while here, a new chapter unfolded. At 3:17 a.m., after 2 hours of effort and whispered encouragements, a cry pierced the room, high, fierce, and perfect. The doctor lifted a squirming, red-faced boy into Sophia's arms, and she laughed through tears, exhaustion giving way to awe. "Leo," she said, naming him on instinct, the sound soft against his tiny wails. Leo Smith, a name that carried strength, a nod to the lion-hearted fight that had brought them here. Massimo froze beside her, his eyes locked on the bundle. Dark curls like hers, a scrunched face that was already his whole world. "Leo," he echoed, voice thick, and when Sophia handed him their son, his hands trembled, cradling the boy like he might break. Tears spilled down his cheeks, unashamed, and he sank onto the bed beside her, staring between them. His wife, his son, the miracle he hadn't dared hope for after all they'd endured. "He's perfect," Massimo said, choking on the words, his free hand finding hers. "You're perfect. He stopped, overwhelmed, and pressed his forehead to hers. Leo nestled between them. "I didn't think we'd get here." "Neither did I," she whispered, her own tears mixing with his as she squeezed his hand. "But we did. We always do." He nodded, kissing her softly, then Leo's tiny head, his joy a tidal wave that drowned out the past, Kane's sabotage, the hospital vigils, the years of battles. The room glowed with it, a quiet triumph after 2 hours of labor and a lifetime of struggle. Sophia watched him, this man who'd chased her, fought for her, stayed through every storm, now undone by the weight of their son in his arms. "Love you," he said, raw and simple, and she smiled, exhaustion and elation blurring into one. "Love you too," she replied, resting against him. Leo's cries softened to whimpers, and the three of them stayed there, a family expanded by a miracle, their bond sealed anew, unbreakable, unshakable, and whole. Sophia leaned against Massimo in the hospital bed, Leo's tiny weight a warm anchor between them, his newborn whimpers fading into soft breaths. Massimo's tears had dried, but his eyes stayed locked on their son, a quiet reverence in the way he held them both. The room hummed with the afterglow of birth. 2 hours of labor forging a new piece of their family, a miracle born from resilience. They'd faced betrayal, near tragedy and doubt, but here they were, whole and stronger, Leela waiting at home to meet her brother. As dawn crept through the window, Massimo kissed her temple, murmuring, "We're unstoppable," and she smiled, knowing it was true. Years rolled forward, a tapestry of chaos and calm, Lila growing into a fierce curly-haired girl who adored her little brother. Leo toddling after her with Massimo's grin and Sophia's spark. The couple built a life beyond the city's glare, a home filled with laughter, occasional storms, and a love that weathered it all. Massimo scaled back his empire, prioritizing late-night stories over boardroom battles, while Sophia's charity work bloomed, a legacy of grit and grace. Cain faded into obscurity, Veronica a forgotten footnote, their past foes powerless against the family they'd forged. Act 15. The satisfying ending. On a golden autumn afternoon, 10 years after that first crash, Massimo and Sophia returned to the corner where it all began. The street was quieter now, the city softened by time, but the spot still held its echo. The scuff of her sneakers, the screech of his Maserati, the collision that sparked a destiny neither had seen coming. Lila, now 12, chased 8-year-old Leo across the sidewalk, their laughter ringing as they dodged fallen leaves, while Massimo slipped an arm around Sophia's waist, pulling her close. "Look at us," he said, his voice low, warm against her ear. "Back where you tried to take me out." She laughed, leaning into him, her curls brushing his cheek. "You're the one who wouldn't let me go." "Never will," he replied, turning her to face him. The kid's giggles faded as he cupped her face, his hazel eyes tracing hers with the same intensity from that first day. "You were always my destiny, Sophia. Every fight, every chance, led me right here." Her breath caught, the years collapsing into this moment, and she smiled, soft and sure. "Mine too." He kissed her then, slow and deep, the world blurring around them, traffic humming, leaves swirling, Lila shouting for Leo to wait up. It was a kiss that held everything. The crash, the chase, the vows, the near losses, the miracles. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, and he whispered again, "Always." She nodded, her hand finding his, and they stood there, rooted in the spot that had changed them. Their kids racing ahead, their love a quiet, unshakable force. They'd built a life from that first spark, and as the sun dipped low, casting gold over the street, Sophia knew this was their ending, satisfying, earned, and forever theirs. Thank you for watching, family. Please hit the subscription button and see you in the next one.